All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this session, Making Group Work Work here at Teach E Conference. I do want to let everybody know as we get started, we have this meeting will be recorded and later posted on YouTube. So just keep that in the back of your head. Other big thing to know, oh my goodness, we're going to get some wonderful presentations. As those are going on, you got to light up the chat. Let's get the chat blowing up with questions. We're going to compile all the best questions, the ones with the most likes, and at the end we'll have a Q&A session where we hear all the best questions and amazing responses from our great presenters. Oh my goodness, I cannot wait. Real quickly, let's introduce everybody. I'll be serving as chair today. I'm Kevin Owens. I'm an instructor of economics at Western Kentucky University. Our chat chair, Dr. Clodagh Jenkins, from the Imperial College London. We'll be hearing from Dr. Prashan Karunaratne from Macquarie University, Dr. Priscilla Tavares from the School of Economics, Sao Paulo, and Dr. Courtney Ward from University of Toronto. And I'll give a little bit more formal introduction of each of them before they get started. Without further ado, we'll head first to Dr. Karunaratne's presentation. Dr. Karunaratne is an award-winning senior lecturer at Macquarie University. He holds master's degrees from the University of New South Wales and University of London, as well as a PhD in management from Macquarie. He has authored several papers on best practices in economics education, especially focusing on making what some people view as our perhaps dry and theoretical field accessible to students, which is so important. Today, we're going to hear his thoughts on using Lego Serious Play in a cross-disciplinary capstone unit. I pass the floor to you, Dr. Karunaratne.
Thank you so much, Kevin, for that very generous introduction. Nice to see some faces I've seen at the DEE conferences like Parma and Clodagh across the years. Thank you for having me. It's 1:30 a.m. in Sydney, so apologies for the wonderful lighting in the background here. I'll just share my screen. If I may, I believe you can see my screen. Hi, everyone. My name is Prashan, and I'm going to speak to you about using active learning using Lego Serious Play in a cross-disciplinary capstone unit. I look after the Bachelor of Commerce at Macquarie University, and in this Bachelor of Commerce, we actually have 12 majors: accounting, business analytics, business information systems, cybersecurity governance, economics, entrepreneurship, finance, HR, international business, management, and 2 distinct majors in marketing. So it's quite a different mix of students. Of course, economics is in there, as you can see as well. And the way the regulation works in Australia, if you have a single degree, even if there are multiple majors, the capstone must be for the entire degree, and hence where the cross-disciplinary capstone that I'm going to talk about comes from. The students spend their second and third year within their majors, and just before they graduate in third year, they do this cross-disciplinary capstone subject. So the learning outcomes, there are 3 of them, and I've just summarized them in one word each for the learning outcomes, is interdisciplinarity, teamwork, and sustainability. And all of these geared towards enhancing our student employability skills. The actual structure of the unit is we have an industry guest lecture. They come on Mondays, and they come from various industries, given that we have so many disciplines within the capstone, and they give us context to how they are working in their field, where economics meets finance, meets accounting, meets marketing, and all the disciplines. And then we take the reflections of the guest speakers in with the readings that we give our students, and then we break off into 50 student seminar groups where we have a blend of active learning, team-based learning, and problem-based learning. We have had it on Zoom, obviously, in the last few years, but last year especially, we've been going back to the face-to-face learning in classrooms where we really get that interdisciplinary thinking and learning together in an active setting in the classroom, as the bigger photo shows. So we got the idea of Lego Serious Play when we were designing this, we call them units in Australia for a subject. Lego Serious Play is used in industry for training their workers or for job interviews. And Lego Serious Play is an actual methodology, and there's lots of resources out there which you can buy, or free resources on the internet, of course, as well as several videos with several different types of workshops and activities ranging from 10 minutes to several hours for team building sessions. In terms of activating Lego Serious Play in our classrooms, this involved us buying lots of Lego, which is not too cheap. And I have a few of these boxes lying around, and then there's logistics involved in having them on trolleys and wheeling them around campus. And so when our staff are wheeling these trolleys around campus, there's a little bit of buzz that, oh, it must be the BCom capstone lecturers doing yet something exciting in their classrooms. In the very first seminar, they now are going to meet all these students from all these different majors. And we want to break the ice, but we also want to do it purposefully because it is a capstone unit. So they're coming into the capstone, having done their majors, economics, finance, marketing, and so on, but also having done some subjects way back in first year, which were common to all the majors. They've also done lots of activities with student societies and sports and volunteering and perhaps their part-time work. So the very first activity to help them break the ice, but also start reflecting, is for them to actually build a reflective collage of what their journey of university was like. And to break the ice even further, they've got to do it in a group setting. So whoever happens to be sitting on their table that day, they start discussing about their university journey, and they start building a Lego collage of this. So the little star there that you see is the group of 4 or 5 students who've now built different elements of that Lego journey. Going from the beginning, you can see a Lego person there with a lake and some doors, and they're gradually going towards the right. And then there's a big slide going into the big world out there. We find that it's a good activity to help them think about what they've done, but also start reflecting on all the different elements, but also seeing how their journeys have similarities and differences to each other, irrespective of their majors, and also the unknown at the end, where they're anxious about what might happen when they graduate and the job application process and so on. Now, how does this work online? Version 1, I think 2020 semester 1. How do I do this online? So I told the students, if you're in an online class, you have to find whatever is on your desk to start creating elements of this collage and taking photos and then putting it on Google Sheets, and then everybody else in your team putting those pictures together to come up with a reflective collage. Another idea, I thought 2020 semester 2, maybe I'll create some bits and pieces using Lego and create kind of library for them, and then they might put these pieces together. Then eventually I realized, why am I doing this? We've got Lego libraries of photos like Pixabay and Shutterstock and Flickr already out there. And I can simply direct the students to all these Pixabay type websites and then give them kind of a template file, and they can start building their reflective collage about their university journey. And then using that activity, we can get into the more prose side of reflection, where we talk to them about Gibbs' reflective cycle, and then they can actually begin to write a prose essay, which is the very first slide you see. The second one you see is more of a description of their essay using the Lego collage. And the third item you see, we asked them to build an infographic about their journey, because after the first 2 weeks, they need to share that infographic with their team members. So there are 13 weeks in our semester, and the first 2 weeks focus on reflection, and they go into the third week by sharing that infographic, the third picture you see in that slide, and then they can meet their team members. Another idea for Lego Serious Play came from what the students were saying during the interview process, where in the interview process, different companies put them in a group setting and throw Lego in front of them. And some companies even use Lego in the training of their workers to make their workspaces more efficient. There's a broadband network in Australia, and they use Lego Serious Play to help make the operations side of their teams more efficient by giving them a visual of how they share resources and plan their workspaces. We wanted to bring this into the classroom as well. So now when they meet their team members in week 3, where we've created cross-disciplinary teams, we give them all identical Lego sets. Each team of 5 students, let's say, and there are usually 10 teams in a classroom, get the exact same Lego set, and they have to now decide how they're going to plan their workstation, how they're going to delegate tasks. So you can see the microeconomics and division of labor coming in here, and they have to decide how they're going to actually strategize to build this Lego set as fast as possible. We give them 10 minutes to plan, and then every team uses different strategies, and then they all start creating the Lego set. And that usually takes between 8 to 12 minutes, depending on the different teams' planning and design strategies. So it's a good icebreaker now that they've met their team members in the 3rd week, and they've realized all the different skills that each other has. And again, it's a lighthearted way of actually doing something regarding teamwork. How might this work online? I will create a Lego collage using Pixabay, and I will show them the collage that they're supposed to produce. I will put little white boxes there so they can't cheat. And then I ask them to produce the exact same collage by going through Pixabay and finding the different pictures in that collage. Eventually, I'm teaching them about Tuckman's stages of teamwork: forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning, using that exercise. And then that helps the teams work on their capstone projects throughout the semester, which are geared towards the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. It's a great way to get students from across different majors to find a common theme and how their skills come into play. There's an activity sheet that guides their team discussions each week regarding the project. And now that they've really built some familiarity with each other and teamwork skills with each other, it really helps that student interaction throughout the semester. Even though they've come from a variety of backgrounds, all these activities have helped loosen things up and break the ice and get everybody's usual reservations about teamwork out of the way. And they work consistently throughout the 13 weeks to write a report where each chapter focuses on their different majors. You can have very specific lessons on very specific topics in economics with Lego Serious Play: demand and supply, production and cost, my favorite one, market structures and comparative advantage. Production and cost is a very fun one where you can really break down. Every team has to make a very small Lego item, and you see how many they can make with 1 worker in the production line, with 2 workers in the production line, with 3 workers in the production line. You start to see the increasing marginal product at the beginning, and then eventually there's way too many workers in the production line and the decreasing marginal product towards the end, and the law of diminishing returns. It's very great for school outreach and open days, even for primary school children in the first photo, because it's obviously a nice interactive activity. And I think my 12 minutes is up. Thank you so much.
Wonderful stuff, Dr. Karunaratne. Thank you very much. Really excited to talk about that further when we get to our kind of discussion portion. Now we'll pass it on to Dr. Tavares. Dr. Tavares is a professor at the Getulio Vargas Foundation School of Economics in Sao Paulo, where she also earned her PhD in economics. In her past, Dr. Tavares has worked at as a consultant for countless places, including the United Nations and the Economic Research Institute Foundation. She has research interests in applied microeconomics, labor economics, and the economics of education. Today, we're going to hear from Dr. Tavares on her insights on active learning in economics higher education. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much for the warm presentation. Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, let me thank you all for being here today. As Kevin said, my name is Priscilla Tavares. I'm from Brazil, and I am a professor and a pedagogical coordinator at São Paulo School of Economics. Let me share my screen with you. Can you see the slides? Okay. Okay, just a second. Okay. Today I'd like to present you the teaching methodology we use in our economics undergrad course, and more specifically, I'm going to talk about the results of a study we conducted here to understand how class composition in terms of ability and friendship among students impacts the student performance, okay? So, okay. In our school, PBL, problem-based learning, has been used in all subjects as the main teaching methodology since 2013. And in PBL, the main, how can I say, pedagogical meeting is called tutorial, okay? In a tutorial, a group of up to 15 students discusses the solution of a concrete problem under the supervision of a professor that we call a tutor. The objective of each tutorial is to learn a set of economics concepts, models, instruments based on a concrete situation. That is, the intention is that the applications can provide the basis for learning abstract concepts, okay? So, let me talk about the dynamic. The tutor proposes a concrete and an ill-structured problem to students and recommends some material to consume in a meeting that we call pre-discussion. Tutorial preparations requires that students consume that material and try to solve the proposed problem as a group. 2 days later, in the post-discussion sections, students present the solution as a group as well. And the teacher, by observing that exposition, is able to solve doubts, correct misunderstandings or misinterpretations, and also deepen the understanding of the content, okay? So we also have strong incentives for participations because in each tutorial, students receive an individual grade based on their engagement in the discussion. That grade could not reflect the learning properly, but its engagement or participation. Okay, how we allocate our students. Each student in a given cohort is allocated to a different tutorial group for each course taken. So, for example, if the student is taking Introduction to Economics and Calculus in the semester, he will be in 2 different tutorial groups, okay? So, as we have about 80% of the entire course load made up of PBL tutorials, students interact a lot with different colleagues throughout the whole course. So as you can imagine, peer learning is quite meaningful for us. And that's because we want to know how the impacts of different compositions of tutorials on learning. Okay, talking about our study. Our interest is to know what are the impacts of the composition of tutorial groups on students' learning. So we want to know if it's possible to enhance learning opportunities, combining students with different profiles, okay? So we'd like to answer questions like, how does the differences of abilities among students can affect performance? Does a student derive more benefit in terms of learning from being in the same tutorial group as the best students in the class, for example? Or do the benefits of peer learning depending on the personal affinity or friendship that exists between students? So we conduct an experiment and what we did, we randomly allocated students to tutorial groups of subjects starting 2nd, 3rd, and 4th semesters. And the identification of peer effects explores the variation both in terms of the share of low and high ability students we have in each tutorial group, as well as the frequency that peers meet for group work. So we have a measure of ability, that is the students' average grade in previous semesters, and we also observe how many times one student meets other students in group works, okay? We also observe a measure of friendship or affinity among students based on the information reported by themselves about who are the colleagues with whom they would like to interact more in the tutorial groups of the following semesters. Okay, so unfortunately, we don't have time to discuss the technical details of the estimation, so I'm going to summarize the main results we have so far. That's a problem of my mouse, okay. The results. First of all, what we know. The share of low and high ability peers in a group is not able to explain by itself positive peer effects on performance, okay? These effects only arise when the high ability colleague is a peer in more than one tutorial group. So our first result is increased interaction with high ability peers impacts on a positive way performance, okay? But this effect also depends on whether the student himself is classified as low or high ability, and on the links, the bonds that exist between them. So let me talk about low ability students. Low ability students learn more when he is allocated with a high ability peer in a tutorial group, just if this colleague is a friend. And what can be the mechanism here? If I have difficulties and I work with someone who is very good in the same class, I only learn more if that someone is my friend. Why? probably because I feel comfortable to ask questions. He helps me after class and so on. Okay. But if he's not my friend, the effect on me is negative. Probably because I don't understand what he says in the tutorial. I get lost on the discussion. I'm embarrassed to ask and so on. But on the other hand, students with lower performance who work in the same class with colleagues who are not their friends only benefit if the colleagues are also low ability. How is that possible? If I have difficulties and I work with someone who also has difficulty in the same class, I only learn more if that someone is my friend, because this creates a more favorable climate to study and to focus on the discussion. I'm not inhibited, but we are there just to study. But if the guy is my friend, I learn less, probably because we get distracted in the tutorial. And, when we are together outside the classroom, we do other things than study and things like that. So that's the interesting and challenging to explain the results we have so far. Next steps, we have been working on understanding of what are the effects of gender and socioeconomic different compositions in the tutorial group in order to reach other results, other different dimensions of the tutorial compositions, and to better explain the results we just get. Okay. That is, thank you so much for your attention, and I'm happy to answer questions in the Q&A session. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Tavares. That was wonderful stuff. Very excited to see questions about that when we get to the Q&A session. We'll go ahead and introduce our last speaker, Dr. Ward. Dr. Courtney Ward is a teaching stream professor of economics at the University of Toronto. She holds a master's degree from Queen's University and a PhD from the University of Toronto. Dr. Ward has research interests in externalities and health economics. She's taught a host of courses, including applied econometrics, topics in health economics, and again, many others. Today, we're going to hear her findings on the importance of class presentations in capstone projects. Pass the floor on to you. Thank you, Dr. Ward.
Thanks. Thanks very much, Kevin. So let me just share a screen here. And away we go. Okay, so I'm going to talk about oral presentations today within the context of group work, but I want to start by giving a bit of background motivation. So I spend a lot of time thinking about how to deal with scale issues while still developing third year, fourth year level skills through course projects. So how to deal with projects in groups of 80 to 180 students. So my approach is to scaffold the project to phases and front end a lot of those phases with formative work and peer processes, so group work, okay? So what I'm going to show you today is the presentation phase of the course projects that I run, which I run in 2 different courses with completely different learning goals in those courses. I'm going to keep it quite high level today in my presentation, and we can talk about examples in those courses if we want, if you guys are interested. Okay, so I do this in 2 stages, these presentations. The first stage is we have students present to each other in groups in class. Okay, and the second stage, they can revise from there. The second stage is they submit a video to be graded by TAs. Okay, and now my own first motivation to doing this, to adding in oral presentations in their projects, was so that they could go on and describe them in their internship interviews. So this is what I thought the big value added would be. But when I ask them at the end of the course what they learned, what was their most important learning outcome, they don't describe that at all. They talk a lot about how much it helped them redirect their analysis and form their project. So the formative aspects and how important it was to get peer feedback from their peers. Okay, and in the end, that's sort of obvious. That's what we're doing here at a conference like this. We're sharing our ideas and getting feedback from each other, and that is incredibly important to the process of learning. Okay, so I'm going to show you a little bit about how I do this, and it all starts with a rubric. So as I said, I do this in 2 different courses with different learning goals, and I start with thinking, what do I want students to learn? Okay, and how would I instruct my TAs to assess this learning? And that gives the rubric, and that's the key to the whole thing. That's the thing that is going to thread through the entire process and make sure that we are aligned throughout everyone in the course. Okay, so there's 3 steps. I introduce the presentation, workshop, assessment with the rubric elements. So I want them to pay attention to what should be in that presentation. And then we move to the presentation workshop, where they give 3-minute presentations in groups. And at the end of this, they do peer and self-assessment using that same rubric. Okay, so they're keyed to listen and make sure they have these elements in their presentation. And then the last is a video submission, again, 3 minutes. And this is graded using that same rubric by course staff. Okay, so essentially we repurpose the grading rubric through each step. Okay, so then what happens in this workshop, this presentation workshop? So this is where we do the group work. We organize into groups of about 4, and each presents once. So we have 4 presentations in the session. And these are the steps for each presentation. We start with a note-taking package distributed. This is paper booklets, and they have the key rubric elements, the things that I want them to learn through this project on there. Okay, so this is important for aligning those learning outcomes, because I want presenters to both be having this in their presentation and also be able to listen to the same type of thing in other people's projects. Okay, so I have that on the note-taking package. So the first presenter starts, they present for 3 minutes, no aids, so you can't have slides, nothing like this. And peers are primed to listen for those rubric elements. Okay, and then we go to the note-taking sheet. Presenters and peers write down their notes for those elements, and we move to discussion. And the last thing we do is formative assessment using that rubric again. This rubric at this point is framed for growth. So what did you do well? What would you earmark for revision? And both presenters and peers score that, okay? And so this is like that childhood game of telephone. I don't know if you've ever played that, where you sit in a circle and you start with a message and each person whispers it to the next person. At the end, you repeat the message out loud to see how much information content went through. So in this case, I tell the students what to present. The students develop the message. They tell it to their peers. Their peers are keyed in to listen for those elements. And they write it down on the note-taking exercise, tell it to me, and they tell it to their presenter. So their presenter can assess how well that message was delivered down the telephone line, okay? And they can revise that message for us in the video, okay? So we do this 4 times in the session. At the end of the workshop, people get their note-taking pages and a summary of the formative assessment for their presentation. Okay. Oops. So this is what it looks like in class. So you can see you can do it in a bunch of different types of classrooms as long as you can make groups. Here's my timing notes. Here's a student working on the note sheet and filling in the rubric that's completed online. So then we go to the video submission. This is very stripped down, 3 minutes, straight run, no cuts, no aids, no prompts, no reading. Okay, submitted and graded by our course staff using that same rubric, as I said. So I want to talk a little bit about student impact, and I'm going to talk about it in the context of a course I teach called Applied Econometrics. So this is a 3rd year econometrics course, and they're working on empirical projects in this course. And I asked them, we can take a look at the presentation workshop stage, what they say they should revise, and then also what they say they learned fast forwarding to the end of the course, looking back. Okay, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this. This is the workshop formative assessment rubric, and this is the peers earmarking revisions and the presenters earmarking revisions for themselves. Okay, and so you can see that presenters earmarked revisions at a high rate for the conclusion. They want to pin down the bottom line message of their results, which is normal because this is a formative process. So they want to get to that end point. Okay. In terms of a peer exchange being useful at the time when they're in the workshop, a majority say that it is extremely useful to see a peer's work in terms of helping with their own revisions. Okay, so that's great. Now that's at the time in the workshop. What happens by the end of the course? The workshop is quite energetic, it's exciting, there's lots of aspirational plans for their projects, but what happens after that? We have the rest of the semester, they submit their video, they write up their analysis, the course concludes, and at that point I ask them to reflect back on the course, and I have a few questions on the presentation component. Okay, so the first thing I ask is about their peer-to-peer learning now at the end of the course. Did they learn more about summarizing and presenting research analysis from seeing peer projects? And you can see that a majority agree or strongly agree with that. And then they also asked them if they learned by sharing their own work. So, and you can see a stronger majority agree with that it's useful to share your own work in terms of gaining these skills and presenting. In terms of the written responses, what they say, the top themes in their learning outcomes from that presentation are improved summarizing and presentation skills. Second, enhanced collaboration and peer interaction, and then also increased confidence in presenting. And when you look back through these written responses at the things that the design elements that are discussed most often as contributory to the learning outcome, it's these 5 things. The first is a short clock, so you have to be concise. The restrictions on visual aids, so you have to understand your project in a deep way. The small group structure, so the fact that you're in these smaller, more intimate groups. Fourth is the opportunity for this back and forth feedback and discussion. And the fifth is that there's an opportunity to revise, so that's this productive in some way. There's some end to this. Okay, so in terms of the learning outcome on summarizing, we have a lot of students who say that they learn to better summarize. Here's a student who says that, and the key element is a short clock. Another student who mentions again the short clock and the fact that there were no aids as contributing to this ability to summarize. Here is the second, the collaboration and peer interaction, often mentioned. Okay, so here's a student who talks about learning from others. Here's another one using feedback from peers. And then this is a student talking about that back and forth communication. So this comes out of the opportunity to collaborate. So being able to speak with each other and knowledgeably, and the fact that the revisions are still possible. So it's productive, as I said. In terms of increasing confidence in presenting, we see that for people who had very little experience presenting coming in, they talk about the small groups and the peer work as helping them here. But we also have students who are more seasoned presenters who talk about the short clock and the fact that there are no aids is really helping them gain these skills in synthesizing. Okay, so why does the presentation workshop work? In a word, I think it's camaraderie. I think there's a few elements at play producing this. So first, students are coming, they're presenting something they've created themselves. So they're coming open and vulnerable. So this is something they've created. Okay, but the process is formative. So it's okay to have revisions, and it's expected even that you're going to have revisions. Third, the assignment criteria are clear. So peers know how to be helpful to each other. Okay, and that's really important. So they have the information to know this is what you should have in your presentation. This is how you might revise. Okay, and the fourth is that groups are small. So there's space and opportunity to encourage each other. Okay, and I think that's sort of critical to this working. So here's a student of mine who brought a support bear for their presentation group during the presentations. And so I think we have, up here, vulnerability, and then down here, this opportunity to encourage. This is not something that I think you could achieve as easily if you had solo presentations at the front of the classroom or peer work online to videos. I think it has to do with being in class together in a group. Final notes, settings where this works well is where you can define a clearly set assignment, so with a corresponding rubric. Usually works if it's scheduled a little bit later in the course where there's rapport in the classroom, a lot of trust built up, and consistency in the incoming skills that you need to do this. Okay. And I find it works in in-person settings more easily. I want to note that there's less scope for off-the-shelf generative AI in this process. Okay, we're still hitting those higher order skills targets, but if you look at the presentation workshop, it's done with paper and pen, and it gauges comprehension of key rubric skills. Not only that you have to explain that in your own project, but you have to be able to listen to it, those same things in your peers' projects. The videos provide an authentic account of students' knowledge in their own words as well. Okay, so you have this process point where students are really having to come with their own information. The last thing I want to say is that outside of achieving course content goals, presentations like this develop a generalizable skill set. I think that's useful for students. So many of our students are interviewing and are required in the interview process to upload short time videos. Or they're going to enter workplaces where they're called to concisely articulate work to their colleagues or work with colleagues in an iterative and interactive process. And these are, if you look at the top 3 things that they say they learned, these are the most mentioned amongst those learning outcomes. So I think it's useful to try to give them the opportunity to develop these skills in our courses. So thank you very much.
Awesome stuff, Dr. Ward. Thank you very much. Really cool. Oh my goodness, wonderful presentations from everybody. I tell you what, let's go ahead and transition to our Q&A, and I'll try and hop back and forth from our different presenters and ask some question. First for Prashan, from one of our participants here. So did students need any additional training on how to create infographics, or on what specifically you were looking for on their reflections?
That is a good question. Interestingly, the faculty decided that the name of this capstone is called Agility and Excellence in Business. And because of the agility element, we give them access to Adobe software and Canva online, and we do give them links to some resources, but we ask them to self-learn and self-learn within themselves, but also to train each other in the teams as well. Trying to emulate what they might experience in the workplace, where they're given resources to new software and they have to learn in that setting. So because we've got agility in the title and woven into one of the learning outcomes, we actually make it onus on them to teach themselves.
Really good stuff. Definitely going to have to learn some self-teaching skills for sure. That's too cool. We'll transition over to Dr. Tavares. Question for you from the chat. Do you have any guidance from the results you get? Do you have any guidance for us on how you would want to assign groups? How do we set up our groups based on your results?
A guide for what? Sorry.
So based on your findings of, what people do we put together to make an ideal cooperative group?
Okay, so it's very difficult because we have results that do not match one with other. So I don't know the answer, but it's really interesting to learn from the results that it's not so obvious that being with the best students is good, and so our objective is learn more about tutorial compositions, but we don't have the answer of how is the best composition at all. Okay.
Gotcha. Okay. Good stuff. For Dr. Ward, how did this presentation play into like the final grading of your class? How important was it?
Okay, so it's a phase project. So, and there's 6 phases. 3 are kind of the normal proposal, presentation, paper phase that you would see. And then each of those is front-ended by one of these formative processes. So the workshops themselves are participation-based 1%, but I can't require students to be in class all the time. So I drop one. So the presentation workshop itself, you could miss it without it having any grade implications. That said, I think I was just looking at the numbers, 92% attendance in my one class, and I think it's 89% in my other class. And so these are students who are showing up to present. And if I was an undergrad, I would have hated that and I would have tried to avoid it, but they don't, because there's some value to doing it. So it's sort of intrinsically valuable to them. Then the presentation itself is worth, I think, 30% of the project grade, and it ends up being about 10%, maybe 8% of the total course grade.
Cool. All right. We'll throw it back over to Prashan from one of our participants here. Do you think this can be easily be angled into like specifically economics type courses and not just more broadly kind of business style courses? What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, I have used it in first year economics. I very quickly ran through it with production and cost towards the end. So we like to teach, we have to teach about production theory, the product curves and the cost curves. And, the textbook examples talk about the pin factory or car factory, for example. It'll be nice for that to be emulated in a lecture setting. So you can have a very small Lego model like the Lego duck, which you can buy, which is, I think, 7 pieces. And you see how many little ducks one student can create in 45 seconds. And then you add 2 to the production line and so on. So you are showing the economic concepts, labor versus capital, short run versus long run, marginal product versus total product. You invert that marginal cost versus total variable cost. So you can actually strategically weave the purposeful economic concepts that are actually part of the curriculum and the learning outcomes into that activity and remove it from the students not being able to feel the textbook example, but actually see that visualized in front of them. Because cost curves can be quite abstract sometimes. And if they can keep relating that to what I saw happen in front of me, where those increasing marginal product came at the beginning and then diminishing marginal product later. So you can have very specific topics woven in, such as production and cost curves, and have a win-win situation of saving lecture time by the activity is teaching the concept as well, but it's also a different way of covering the content rather than just going through slides alone.
Cool stuff. Yeah, I certainly, I'm sure many of y'all have noticed the difficulty of getting cost curves into a kind of accessible way of visualizing. So having that kind of in your hands kind of example, definitely onto something there. Good stuff. Another question here from the chat for Dr. Tavares, and you may have mentioned this. How did you measure this friendship variable?
Okay, we have a question for them, and they have to choose the colleagues they want to work in the following semesters in tutorial groups. So it's an individual answer, okay? that we question on the, I don't know, the end of the semester. I forgot, but yes, they have the completely list of all colleagues, and they point out what the colleagues they want to work on with.
Cool. And just to elaborate on that a little more, I saw someone had asked, so if you're asking them who you would like to work with again, is there a way to tease out how much we like this person versus how successful I was with this person, if that makes sense?
Yeah, probably they choose based on friendship, and also on how my colleague can help me in the future. But it's precise. We want to observe. Okay, what are the colleagues that could help me more?
Cool, cool. And we'll hop back over to Dr. Ward here. I noticed you emphasized this, no slides and short clocks several times. How important do you think that is for kind of preparing students for the real world, things like interviews and presentations that they'll actually make in their professional careers?
Yeah, so I think it's actually pretty key when so first of all, the decision to do that was based on like the idea of a 3-minute thesis. But then also in terms of just course resources, it's much easier for us to grade 3-minute videos. It's much easier. We can get groups of size 4 and through 4 presentations in our standard lecture length. So it works out that way. But it turns out to be, when you look at through the results of what students have learned, one of the things that they mention most often as critical to it is that you're forced to summarize, and you have to be out there alone without slides. And so you really have to understand what it is that you're doing. And it's great that it happens before they write their project, because it's a point where you have to decide, what's this project going to be about? And you're trying to form that. And so 3 minutes is all you need in order to really drill down and say, what's the bottom line message? So I think it's actually pretty key. I didn't know that going in, but yeah, the no aids, the 3-minute clock, pretty important.
Absolutely. Really cool stuff. Dr. Karunaratne, have you heard from employers on their thoughts about this? What pops into my head during your presentation is, oh my goodness, this is something that students can then take into an interview and say, this is a really cool thing I did in college that built my kind of team building skills. What do you think? What have you heard about that?
So actually, it was the other way around, because we heard our students were using Lego Series Play in their interview settings. So I'm not sure about the UK, Canada, or the US, but let's say the big 4 corporations, they go through several stages of interviews for the students, and eventually there's a group interview. And sometimes they have Lego thrown in front of them, and they're told to do X, Y, Z with it. And then obviously the 2 or 3 assessors are simply observing how the students interact with that Lego and form teams and delegate tasks, who's a leader, who's a listener, and so on. So one idea was for us to give students some familiarity with doing an activity like that before it became a surprise to them in a group interview setting. And yes, as Courtney has also said, we also get them to do a presentation, which is a 3-minute elevator pitch about their employability skills that they've gained at the end of the capstone, because it's the end of the degree essentially. And students can then use that same video or a version of that in their practice for job interviews, or actually use that in the actual submission if they felt confident. So yeah, kind of the other way around actually. Where we got the idea to start incorporating what we learned that industry are doing already. And as I mentioned, some companies actually use it in training existing workers in team building, as well as training them in their organizational practice and delegation of tasks across teams.
Awesome. Oh my goodness. Hearing about, I'm a little surprised that, this Lego Serious Play has shown up in the interview process. That's really interesting. We'll pass it on back to Dr. Tavares. One participant asks here, could there be a free riding effect when low ability students are paired with high ability students? What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, for sure. When we have a low and a high ability students together, it's common to see the high ability one doing all the job, but we have strong incentives for participation. So in each tutorial, each students get an individual grade based on their engagement. So we tend to minimize free riding behaviors. Okay.
Can I add something about team formation, if I may?
Please.
So because it is mixed major, it's very tricky. We have to make sure that the mix is there. So we ask students, what do you nominate as your 6 team members, let's say, because they form teams in the 3rd week. And then we practice a bit of free market economy and command economy. They've nominated a group of 6, and then we split it in 3, and then we merge that half with another half. So they get to choose their friends, but then we break it in half, and then we merge half of that with another group of friends, getting a bit of both.
All right, I'm going to turn now to another question. I believe you might have answered this in the comments, but I want everybody to see this. For Dr. Ward, did they also submit a final paper? And are they allowed to use slides in their final presentation?
So no, they can't use slides in any of the presentations. So the video itself is just them talking, just like I'm talking to you guys right now, not reading off of any slides, nothing like this. And they do submit a final paper. So they go back from this, and there's several weeks where we work on the actual, in the applied econometrics course, on the actual analysis. And they come with a final paper submitted at the end of the course. And then I can add on just on how I do group work here is I don't assign the groups. In the one course, they work as co-authors, and I let them pick their co-author. So oftentimes they'll pick people that they know, and so they're working in pairs on one project. But then when they come to the group work, they can't have their co-author in a group with them. So when they come to the presentation workshop, for instance, they have to sit in groups of 4, and I will move them. I first of all make sure you can't sit with your co-author, and then I move them around randomly to try to make as many groups of 4 as possible. So everybody gets really mixed up. And I think it would be hard for me to pre-assign groups in that setting just for coordination. But I do try to mix it up as much as possible to break up where, break up the group so that you're seeing a bunch of different people each time we come for group work.
Awesome. And I see we've got somebody who wants to ask a audio question. Brian Lynch, if you had wanted to ask your question.
Actually, Kevin, Claude and Jennifer and Doug posted in the thing before me. So, and my question is, I guess what I'm saying is I'll defer to those 3. And if there's time for mine, there is, but there's not, it's no big deal. So Doug, Jennifer, and Claude had something, so I'd like them to get their turn.
Okay, sure. I did see one question here. So for all of you guys, to what extent did you consider inclusivity when you were designing these methods and kind of running these different experiments and whatnot? If we want to go to Prashan first.
Yeah, great question. So one of the learning outcomes is teamwork. And invariably, you'll have some students from different cultural backgrounds who may be better at communicating in written form than oral form, inclusivity issues from abilities point of view as well. And what we've asked the students to do is that is reflective of what will happen in the real world when they graduate. And the whole point is for them to reflect on how they have navigated that situation and use tools to actually make the team work. So it actually helps them in their reflections right at the end of the semester if they had a challenge or challenges to overcome, because now they have something that has helped sharpen their employability skills even more, because it's given them something to think about, how to incorporate different team members' needs to make it actually an inclusive environment. So it's actually something they get to write about and reflect on, and enhance everyone's experience in their sharpening their skills.
Good stuff. Priscilla, did you have thoughts on this question of inclusivity?
Yeah. Nowadays, we are trying to avoid tutorial groups with just one girl, because as you know, we have a lot of boys and girls, and they feel uncomfortable to talk, to express their ideas when they are alone. So we are trying to assure that we put at least 2 girls at the same tutorial rooms. Okay.
Mhm. Certainly, the gender imbalance in the field of study is a bit of a problem that we deal with from time to time, for sure. Courtney, did you have something to add on this question?
Okay, I did, but I'll bank off of Priscilla's comment of myself as an undergraduate. So it was often that I didn't feel like I belonged in my economics classes. And so when I think about that in my own classes now as a professor, of how to have that welcoming attitude in the class, how to generate this feeling like everybody's invited to belong. And so I think that's where group work can really shine. If I think of papers that I've done when I was in undergrad, I would just do the paper on my own and I would submit it at the end of the semester. And I didn't really know how to write papers. I knew the content that I was being taught, but I didn't really know a lot of the aspects around creating a paper. Okay, so some people just know how to do this in undergrad, some people don't. So I think that part of thinking about inclusivity is being able to design assessments where you get that know-how of how to do it, like how to present, how to have an idea, how to make a table, all of this stuff modeled in the classroom, and then share it together in groups. And I see in the comments, there's a lot of discussion about how to make groups, whether it should be random, etc. And I found that the best way to do that is to have a lot of shakeup of groups, so that the groups are different each week, and that you generate as much as possible this attitude of sharing, and it's all right to share. So I think that is all part of modeling in the front of the classroom, and then also picked up by students throughout the semester.
Yeah, that's a really neat idea of kind of reshuffling groups constantly. I'm kind of curious what the other two presenters' thoughts would be on the importance of reshuffling groups. Is that something you guys have done, or what are your thoughts on that idea?
It is a great idea. We don't reshuffle in the context of the unit I spoke about. But we do throw a curveball in weeks 8 to 10, where the science students are doing a very similar capstone, and they merge for those 2 weeks, those 3 weeks. with our students, so we pair teams up and see how they can use their skills to help the other team. So it's not a reshuffle as such, but it's more like a merge for a short while.
Gotcha.
Here, we have difficulties with reshuffling during the semester, but as we have different tutorial groups for each subject, we can enhance learning opportunities because each student has the opportunity to work with the whole group during the course.
Gotcha. I see another question here. If you guys had, what's the optimal size of a group for group work in a classroom? If you guys had thoughts on that, and we can go to each of you guys again. I guess we'll hop to the Courtney, since we've heard from her least recently.
So I actually don't have any information about that. I'd like to see some research on it, but in terms of what works well in the types of groups that I run, in the presentation workshop, I like it to be 4 because you get at least 3 people and peer assessments from 3 people. I run another session later on that's about their drafts, and then they're in a 2x2. So they meet with 1 peer and share their draft. And that works really effectively because we can really use the time to drill down in detail. So it's more driven by the types of things that I'm asking them to do and the time that we have to do them. So I think a bigger group than 4 starts to get difficult because you can have people who don't need to participate and the group can still function. So yeah, I would say I tend to use groups of 2 to 4.
Yeah, as that group size gets bigger, the free riders just start coming out of the woodwork. Certainly. Prashan, did you have something to add on that idea?
I think I also agree with a group of 4 in a more specialized economics unit. That would be great. Given the nature of the unit I talked about, though, we use groups of 5 to 7 because we do want the mix of majors in that context. We solve the free rider problem by saying that each student still has to deliver their chapter, and the mark for that chapter is only based on your effort alone. And the group mark is based on how they collaboratively write the introduction and conclusion. But yes, a smaller team is always better if you can get away with it because easy to manage.
You find similar things, Priscilla?
Yeah, for the PBL tutorials, we work with groups of up to 15 because, we use tutorials for the whole course, all subjects. So it's difficult to work with smaller groups, but for projects, we also work with groups of 4 or 5. And we also have peer evaluations. So I think that's a good idea to minimize free riding behaviors.
Certainly got to have some kind of peer evaluation. Absolutely. I think that's a great point. And I think we've got someone with their hand up. Is it Kashab Batari?
Sorry, I joined a bit late. I did form my group randomly in my module this year so that students don't feel that they are selected for some purpose, and so that they have confidence that it was a randomly formed group. And then, as colleagues mentioned here, some of you, they work on the project. They like the excitement of working on their topic. They were given some certain topics, but they were free to choose their one topic if they wish, which they did. That made them more motivated. I mean, I found at the end there were some problem of pre-writing. So therefore, I mean, in order to solve that problem, I said that the group work, there should be one group work, but everyone has to submit the group work, it is not only the group leader that submits. So probably that's sorted a little bit, but I think I find the group work was 50% for this model. They have the other individual assignment, individual proposal. So they had to write. So that was my experience, just sharing the things. It's a very great topic. Thank you very much.
Good, good. I found a great question here in the chat. What do we do when groups go wrong? I've certainly had this happen in my classes. What happens when the groups are clashing, perhaps personalities, perhaps other things? What have you been for the presenters? What are your thoughts on that? What's your experience with that?
You can chime in if you would like.
Sure, go ahead.
So I see this in two levels. One is just group work in the classroom. And I think what can help to prevent that kind of thing is constantly modeling, that it's okay to make mistakes, and dealing with mistakes in the classroom in group work, and modeling how to deal with that at the front of the classroom. Where I've run into more problems with group work is on the co-authored papers. So they're working on this throughout the course together, and something goes wrong with one of the partners. And so I now take a hand in sort of setting norms at the very beginning of the semester on how you want to set up your partnership and how you want to work with your partner. And I set aside time in the tutorial where every week I say you should meet with your partner and discuss next steps every week. And if your partner is falling behind, check in with them. If it happens twice in a row that there's a missed meeting, then you can break up. And the incentive is that if you're the person who has not missed the meetings, you get to take the project idea. And the other person has to develop a whole new idea. Now, this seems harsh, but at the beginning of the course, one of our things is we work on 2 ideas per student. So 2 pairs have conceivably 4 ideas, and they pick one out of that. So they can come back to do one of the other ideas if the partnership doesn't work out. And this last semester I instituted this, I had some breakups, but they were really amicable. And in these cases, the people went on and both did great projects in the end. So that's how I've dealt with it, by actually saying this is how you should work in a team. Do these types of things. This is a sign of when it's going bad, and this is what to do about it.
Gotcha. Absolutely. Prashan or Priscilla, did you want to chime in there?
Yeah, here students are very stressed every day because of the PBL tutorial groups. It's a lot to do every day. And when things go wrong, I try to explain that we can learn with what happened, and try to figure out what can be if they can do things in the other way, organize their time in a different way, try to sort different sources of information. So because they are very stressed all the time, so it's a lot to put more effort on their backs.
Mm-hmm.
I would echo what Courtney and Priscilla have said as well. Modeling the teamwork itself and also understanding that students themselves are stressed. And we've also got the industry guests explaining how that might even happen in the world of work, giving them that context, and that students need to learn how to overcome those challenges. So they see the end goal of, okay, I need to start to learn how to negotiate and resolve these conflicts. So yeah, that would be my contribution.
Absolutely. Definitely going to need some conflict resolution when you get to the world of work. I've seen questions for all of our presenters concerning, do you guys have like manuscripts or resources that you've produced that you could shoot out to us via link or something like that about what you've done? I see lots of nodding. Yeah, for sure. All right, so we'll look forward to that. I'm sure that the fine Teach eConference folks will hook up those links for everybody to where we can all get those following this session. I guess we still got time. If you're ready for your question, Mr. Brian Lynch.
This question, I think, is for Prashan, maybe for the rest of the group. I'm going to post a link in the chat that I just found based off another link. How could any of us or any teacher become a Lego play facilitator? I don't mean like how to teach people to use Lego, but I'm wondering if there is, and not that you have to be an accredited Lego user, but I'm wondering, like, is there a way of teachers becoming sort of a Lego facilitator, or is that sort of impractical?
There is an official certification, and at least in Sydney, those workshops are quite expensive. So I think it will be about $3,000 to get the full certification, and that's just for one person. And then you can get the trainer to go get qualified to train your teachers. I found the books, and I can share the links for those books. They're quite cheap. And there's several little case studies in the book to give you ideas as well. And as you start doing it, you start contextualizing versions of the activities that will work for your students. So creativity will come in as well. And maybe your TAs or even your students might come up with ideas. But yes, there is an official certification in the Lego Serious Play methodology, which is a bit expensive. I hope I've answered the question.
Okay, good stuff. I see all those manuscripts popping up in the chat there. All kinds of good stuff. Well, unless one of our presenters had anything else they wanted to add on this topic. No, good stuff. I don't see a lot of new questions. I'm gonna say it's time for networking mixer. Does that sound good to you guys? All right. Well, I'll meet you all over in the networking mixer. That link is in the chat. Thank you all so much for hopping on here, and we'll say goodbye.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Claudia. Thank you, Courtney and Priscilla.